so much, Manav. For our very first keynote, we have Ms. Lada Shelkovnikova, Partner Hotels and Hospitality, Watson Farley and Williams, educating us on hotel management agreement negotiations. Lada specializes in all aspects of hospitality and hotel development related matters. Her clients include hotel owners and operators. She has negotiated and advised on numerous hotel management agreements with major hotel operators, both global and regional, and has experience in over 25 jurisdictions worldwide. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Lada.
Hello everyone, how are you doing today? Good to be here. So the topic goes, the art of creating leverage, or the way I prefer to call it, when there is a real conflict of interest, when there is a real deadlock, how can you still find balance in HMA negotiations? In HMA, there are a number of legal, commercial, financial aspects that have a so-called inherent conflict of interest. It's not just any conflict of interest, it's an inherent conflict of interest. What is? Inherent conflict of interest is a conflict that is based on the mere role of the parties, of their risk and reward allocation. And that's why elimination of inherent conflict of interest is simply impossible. But it doesn't mean that you cannot find the balance. You can always do that, and that's what we're going to discuss today. Why is it important? Because the minute there is an ability to manipulate, there is always an ability to abuse the power. And I'm pretty sure when I say abuse of power, a lot of you would think operator side. You'll be surprised on a number of occasions. The owners are very, very strong and they get their HMAs skewed in their favor and they abuse the power as well. The reality is it doesn't matter who abuses the power, the hotel operations, the hotel performance suffers. The problem with negotiations of this inherent conflict of interest is because 100% of times people approach these negotiations as a so-called zero-sum game. One has to lose for another to win. A fancy word, one has to concede. But it doesn't have to be this way. The pie can be expanded so that the commercial arrangement altogether makes sense for the owner to give up certain things for the operator. And the pie can be broken down into smaller pieces, making it a completely different commercial arrangement, discussing point by point in that big pie to come up with a solution for an exact conflict of interest that exists. Now, this is all background theory, right? You'll be asking, so what are we talking about? Give us examples. And there are myriads of examples, but I will focus on only 3 today. We only have 20 minutes. First one is the FF&E and CAPEX, below the GOP line. Second one is the carve-outs from the owner's budget approval rights. And the third one is the sale of the hotel and the operator's role in it. So we'll start with FF&E and CAPEX. The trick with FF&E and CAPEX, because they're below the GOP line, none of the operator's fees are impacted by these expenses. Meaning that the operator is not financially induced to manage this cost efficiently. That is a statement of fact. However, this, because it's inherent conflict of interest, this structure cannot be changed unless the risk and reward allocation is changed. Why? Because the operator should not be taking the risk below the GOP line because they're not taking any reward below the GOP line. They're not sharing the bottom line with you. They're only providing a service. So why would they take a risk below the GOP line? Right? So that's the fundamental aspect. They're not financially induced to manage your cost efficiently because they're not taking the benefit below the GOP line. So how do we address this? The owners, on the other hand, have a full benefit. They are 100% beneficiary of all these expenses below the GOP line because it impacts their asset appreciation and impacts their valuation when they wish to sell, whenever they wish to sell. And the overarching aspect of it is compliance with brand standards. Compliance with brand standards that are at the discretion and control of the operator because they're the brand owner. It's important that they have full control of that. But because it's a 20-year contract, 30-year contract, it is important to understand that these brand standards will change, especially on the FF&E and CAPEX below the GOP line. So how do we find the balance? It's an inherent conflict of interest. It's a billion-dollar question. On a lot of occasions, we've seen a dispute in arbitration, part of which is a massive wasted CAPEX. It's appalling sometimes to see what's happening on the ground in various hotels and resorts. So, I mean, there are different ingredients to this. I can't tell you all of the ingredients of my secret sauce, but I'll tell you one. I'll tell you one, it's called the Asset Management Guidelines as part of your HMA. You will not see the Asset Management Guidelines in your HMA because until recently, it was not even part of the discussion. Don't expect the operator to give you the Asset Management Guidelines. It's your job to put it forward, to make it part of your HMA, and make the way through in the HMA. It's your homework. What is Asset Management Guidelines? It's a set of rules that allows you to compare various alternatives, revenue generating and non-revenue generating, based on criteria of efficiency. So for revenue generating, the criteria will be net present value. For non-revenue generating, it will be criteria of life cycle cost, of annual cost, of shelf life, of salvage value, and as part of the overall assessment of cost. There are so many aspects of it. Most important thing is to comply with brand standards. But how you get there, there are myriads of ways. To give an example, a broken piece of equipment that will cost you $200,000 US. You can either repair it, short-term solution. You can partly replace it with the same model, with the same specifications, maybe longer-term solution. You can fully replace it with the same model. You can fully replace it with another model from another supplier. Every single of these aspects have a different price tag attached to it. They have a different warranty and a shelf life attached to it. What that allows you is to assess what is the impact on your cash flow today. Are you prepared to take that hit with these long-term or short-term risks and rewards attached to it? So having that asset management guidelines allows you to tailor the solution for your needs based on your return on investment and based on your cash flow management. So having the asset manager, and I cannot stress it enough, asset manager who knows what they're doing is an essential part of your journey as the owner. Having asset manager by your side, doing that exercise with you, and coming with a solution that allows you to comply with standards in the most efficient way, that's what the asset management guidelines stand for, and you have to negotiate that in the HMA. Again, don't expect the operator even to come up with the wording for you. It's not going to happen. So that's one. Let's move to another subtopic, is the carve-outs from the owner's budget pool rights. There are myriads of carve-outs which are absolutely logical, natural, understandable, especially fees, costs that are beyond the operator's control, utilities, license fees, operating taxes. All of these things that are not within the operator's control, they're always excluded, including the employees, existing employees' compensation packages. They're already existing employees, you cannot not pay them, right? So all of these things are naturally excluded. But there are some other exclusions on top of what I just said, which can be subject to discussion and stress testing. So first, is the projections of top line. 1 out of 10 HMAs out there, especially in the luxury and ultra-luxury segment, will have a wording, at least in the first couple of trusts, unless you negotiate way out of it, is that you cannot object to the projections of top line, meaning occupancy and ADR. Why operator wants that? Because they want to make sure that you, as the owner, cannot object to something you may not be necessarily knowledgeable or familiar with. And let's break this down. This whole scenario has to be looked at differently if it's a seasonal owner and if it's someone who does it for the first time. If it's a seasonal owner, you live in business market, this is your playground, you do your market analytics every day of the week, you know your competitors better than the operator does, so you basically know this market better than the operator. In that case, absolutely a no-go. You have to have a say when it comes to projections of top line. If you are less experienced owner, maybe even a first-time owner, it is understandable why operator would be comfortable to give you the ability to object, because that's just, creating a deadlock right there. But there is a solution. If you can offer a solution by saying, I will only object if I can provide a third-party expert opinion, again, an asset manager who runs these hotels in this market and knows this market left, right, and center. If I can provide you an independent third-party opinion that these projections are not realistic, i.e. they're below what they should have been, we have to have a discussion. You have to take my objection on board, and we'll take it from there, and if needed, we go to another third-party expert to determine the dispute. Why is this so important? It's not just ability to object. We don't want to object for the sake of objecting. We want to object to be able to control the budgeted GOP. Why do we want to control the budgeted GOP? Because it impacts our ability to terminate on the performance test. If you have no right to object to a top line, means your performance test is meaningless. Right? So very important. This is ability to object. If you're not experienced enough, get your third-party expert opinion to back you up. It may not be what you wanted it to see. The numbers may be very different in supporting an operator. You never know. You still have to pay for the service. But it's a risk you're willing to take for justifiable top-line projection. The second carve-out from budget approval rights is the procurement. You will see in 2 out of 10 HMAs, you will see a carve-out, a generic carve-out that says procurement on a system-wide, centralized, country-wide, and business-wide segment basis cannot be objected by the owner. This is a very broad statement. Very broad statement. We have to be really mindful that there are 2 justifiable scenarios where you as the owner should not object to procurement. First is brand-specific purchases as part of the brand standard. If brand standard specifies that these amenities have to be bought from Salvatore Ferragamo, you have to buy that from them. You can't buy it from anywhere else and put a sticker to it. So if it's a part of brand standards, you have to comply with it. The second one is mandatory centralized services, including related to software. So if it's part of the brand standards and if it's required for you to be plugged into the system, you can't object to it, fair enough. But what you have to object is to everything else. Why there is an inherent conflict of interest. May not be a conflict of interest today, but will be potentially a conflict of interest 5-10 years from now. First, most operators will have rebates from the suppliers, whether on regional, global, or country basis, it doesn't matter. They will have rebates in shapes and forms, and we are not privy to that, but it does impact their decision-making on who to put in the tender process. The second one is we need to make sure there is no interest in terms of shareholding, but a lot of operators have interest in their suppliers. So how do we manage that? We make sure that whatever the veto rights limitations are, they're only in respect of the brand-specific purchases and mandatory centralized services. Everything else, we have to be able to put forward an alternative supplier whose quality is the same as brand standards requirements, and then it has to be a proper tender process, balancing the value for money. Proper tender process. That way, we eliminate the inherent conflict of interest. Finally, compliance with brand standards. Before we go any further, it is important to understand that the whole point of this topic today is not to find a way to avoid compliance. It's not that kind of session. The point here is that we need to balance the need to comply with brand standards with the need to drive meaningful return on investment for the owner. Make sense? So when the budget approval rights are carved out for compliance with brand standards, that in turn makes a lot of sense, but it's really broad because it doesn't take into account the asset management guidelines that we discussed. It doesn't take into account the rules of implementation of brand standards changes that you also have to negotiate. So when there is a veto right, you have to make sure it is linked to those other provisions that you negotiated around the implementation of brand standards. Not everything is black and white. There are 50 shades of gray in between, and you have to make sure you factor that as part of your carve-out right. So it's not a black and white carve-out. There are reference points. So that's about carve-outs. Finally, I have 5 minutes left about the sale of the hotel and the role of the operator. Even if you're not selling today, even if you have no plans to sell today, we all know that the HMA that you're about to sign, or will sign at some point, is 15, 20, 25 years, maybe longer. Even if you're not planning to sell today, you may need to sell in the future for whatever it is, because of the good price that is being offered. We know everything is for sale at the right price, or because you need to. But when you do sell, you want to make sure that your HMA is supporting you, not creating you obstacles. So that's why, even if you're not planning to sell, it is important that you have this in your HMA from day one, if that's what you need to do in, maybe not you, maybe next generation. So it comes as no surprise for those of you who work on a lot of HMAs as part of your daily routine, that operator always has the right to approve the buyer. But I can't even explain how many times the owners come to me and say, we had no idea, why do we need to get the buyer approved? How is this their business? Who are we selling to? It is their business. Because the HMA is a personal contract. It's not a commodity. You can't just transfer the contract to someone you think gives you a good price and be it. The service is personal because of you, of your capabilities, because of your financial standing, and because of your clean track record. Right? So there will be criteria for the buyer that have to be complied with. Most of them are decent, justifiable, transparent, and tangible. There will be a few that, question marks. We're not going to go into detail, but most of them are decent. Now you have to factor that into your transaction timeline. You can't be selling tomorrow. If you decide to sell tomorrow, it's not going to happen. It's typically 60, 90 days of a proper vetoing process, due diligence process, that the operator needs to be comfortable with the buyer who you're presenting. But most importantly is, if you are that kind of investor who buys to sell, or who builds to sell, if you're one of those who sees the exit point before they actually even start the project, then probably you would need to negotiate a termination on sale. Now, you may not get it. 8 out of 10 attempts to get a termination on sale aren't successful, but there are 2 that get it. So my only worry is that a lot of people taking it lightly and they start to negotiate termination on sale as an 11th hour point. Please do not come to an operator a week before signing ceremony after 7 months of negotiations. You know what, I need a termination. So can we squeeze it quickly into the HMA? Because my board wants me. That's ruining the relationship. You need to be very respectful of the fact that we're talking about brand value. We're talking about a massive commercial term that changes pretty much all of what you were discussing before. So my recommendation and a word of advice, if you need a termination on sale, get it in your LOI, get it early. Make sure that operator knows what is the entire commercial package, and then proceed with the HMA. That is the proper way. You don't want to ruin the relationship, and I've seen, I had one in Singapore when the deal fell apart because after 9 months of negotiations, the owner wanted termination on sale and the operator wouldn't give it to him. So, if you do get a termination on sale, what you will have is a side letter. It's not going to be part of your HMA. It's a very confidential personal arrangement to you. No one will ever know it existed. It will have a freeze-out period. You can't terminate operator on day 1. They will have a freeze-out period, which depends on the positioning of the brand. The higher positioning, the longer the freeze-out period. So for the luxury brands, you probably get twice as long the freeze-out period as compared to a mid-scale brand. Finally, a termination fee. It's not going to be for free. You'll have to compensate the operator for the loss of fees, for the loss of future profit. Now, it is important that it's not just a fixed dollar amount, that it is a formula that is based on the previous performance before termination, and that it's decreasing with the contract approaching maturity. So if you're terminating in the last 3 years of the HMA, the termination fee would be probably twice less as compared to if you terminated halfway through. So that's it from my side. I'm actually perfectly on time. Hope you find it useful, and if any questions, we'll talk offline. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lada. That was truly an informative session.